Hey, Bubbles, welcome back to the channel. So the markets are heating up. They're looking very exciting. And if this last rally took you off guard, that's okay. That's typically what markets do. They tend to fool most of the people most of the time. And this was about the time where everybody was saying that there would be no alt season and altcoins were dead. And that's about the time that it ripped in their faces. So if you were following the channel, we were definitely preparing ourselves for this rally. And the point of this video is how can we prepare ourselves for the future? The future is unwritten. Nobody knows what's happening on the right-hand side of the chart, but there are things that we can do to prepare ourselves. There are things that we can do to prepare ourselves for this potential upside. And if I scooch this chart over, there are things that we can do to prepare ourselves from this downside because the market gives us clues and gives us indications of when these things could happen. That doesn't mean that the market's over right here, but this definitely doesn't. You don't want any side of the market to scare you or surprise you. So anyway, if that sounds good, like and subscribe, and we're just going to dive right in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some charts that you can look at yourself to find out when these things might happen. What are we going to expect for the rest of the cycle? And then I'm going to dive into some entries, how you can find your own entries. Right. So you don't want to be buying a chart that looks like this. It seems tempting, and the FOMO sets in, and your emotions are going to tell you that this is a good time to buy. It's a terrible time to buy because you can see the next day, boom, right to the downside. Now you're at an immediate loss. So let's just dive into some charts and see what I'm talking about here. So right now I have on the total three minus the stable coins. I typically use this chart because it gives you a more accurate representation of the actual altcoin space when you exclude the bulk of the stable coins. And all I've done here is done total three minus USDT minus USDC. And you can just type that right in your computer. Total three minus USDT minus USDC, hit enter, and it's going to pop you up with a chart that looks just like this. And this was a little bit more evident on the weekly chart. So all I did was draw a trend line across this right here. And yes, you can see that we've seen higher prices, but currently as it stands, we are closing beneath it. Now, this doesn't mean that we can't rally any further, but it's just good to know ahead of time, right when the interest is starting to come into the market. We were seeing Google Trends. The search terms were way up, so retail was getting interested. Typically, you get interested at the wrong time, and it would have been very tempting to buy here. And now you can see we're in for a pause. So what is another chart that was giving us some indication that this might happen? This is Bitcoin dominance. And if I just zoom out here, what Bitcoin dominance is it's a chart that tells us what the dominance of Bitcoin is in the market. And what we're looking for, what everybody's waiting for this altcoin season, is for Bitcoin dominance to just fall off of a cliff and give its dominance to the other altcoins. And you can see in this particular bull run, it's just been a nice steady march, and Bitcoin hasn't given anything to the altcoins, probably just because it's had most of the attention. It's had a lot of media attention. It's had a lot of institutional buyers. So there's huge bids behind Bitcoin right now. And that's just the environment we're in. So it just hasn't given anything to the altcoins yet, but it just looks like we are about to do that. First of all, we're hitting this trend line here, pretty powerful trend line here for resistance. We've broken out of this ascending wedge, which is typically a bearish pattern. And if I go into the daily, we broke out of that wedge. We've been preparing for this for weeks, actually, and breaking to the downside in a very strong manner, okay? And so, again, watching this, it might be very tempting to get into the market because you're trying to basically prepare yourself for that nice, several months to the downside for Bitcoin dominance. But if you put this 50% tool, which I've talked about many times on the channel, but I'll just go, it's the fib retracement tool with the settings of 0, 0.5, and 1. That gives you a little calculator, gives you the midpoint. So you can choose a range, any range that you want. But right now, this was a very significant low. So I just took it from the significant low up to the most significant high right here, and it gave me this level right here, which also coincided with some support and resistance. That happens very often, but this is a very high likelihood, high probability area to find support on the Bitcoin dominance. Okay, so what I can do now is I can use that same tool on a smaller range from the high to the low, and this could potentially be an area where we would see a rejection on the Bitcoin dominance. So this right here is probably going to be your entry, because as the Bitcoin dominance increases, typically what that does is it drags on the altcoins. Doesn't mean they have to go down in price too much, but if Bitcoin is going up or if Bitcoin is going down and Bitcoin dominance is going up, then the alts are going to bleed quite a bit more, and a rejection here on the Bitcoin dominance would probably be your a very good entry on your altcoins. Okay. The other one that I talk about quite often is the USDT dominance. And this is basically just showing us in real time where the dollars are going. When this chart is going down, that means dollars are going from USDT into altcoins into Bitcoin. So when this is trending down, which it is right now, that's a very good sign for the altcoins. But we also have this very, very long-standing support line that it has never broken except for last year in November, December area. And one thing that you would want to look on this chart is a potential rally up to retest this trend line, or just a sideways chop in this area is not going to be a very clear signal. But one thing that I can say is that if we do get a rally from here, we do have a likelihood of rejection here. I can use the same 50% tool here just for this shorter term range. And you can see that the 50% tool roughly has a little bit of confluence with this 50% tool as well. Okay, so those are some really powerful tools just to tell you what is Bitcoin dominance doing. If you want Bitcoin dominance to be coming down, and if it is doing that, then your altcoins are probably going to be seeing very happy days. And the other thing that we want to see in the USDT dominance, we really, really, really want to see it break this level. If we break this level, really happy days. You can probably throw money at anything and you're going to make money. Until that happens, it's going to be a little unclear, but you can look at this right now, and we are trending down. We're just trending down, but we want to be aware of both sides of the market. We can rally from here. Where's a high likelihood area of rejection? Probably this trend line, the 50%. And if we get a rejection off that, continue lower, then we're going to target here. This is a very high probability area of a local top at the very least. Doesn't mean that the market is going to top there, but it is a very high probability. This is probably where you would want to be taking profits. So just on a very basic sense, you might consider an entry in this zone on your altcoins, buying support on your altcoins while this is getting rejected here. And then what you might consider doing is then taking your profits somewhere in this zone. Okay, so these are very, very powerful charts to take a look at when you're deciding, just getting an idea of the tide and of the what is the tide of the market doing. Okay, so now I'm going to dive into some charts just to kind of do's and don'ts. Okay, so what charts do you want to avoid and what charts do you want to be more interested in? This looks like a beautiful chart. It looks like something you would absolutely want to be interested in. Full disclosure, I have a very large position in this token, but I wouldn't recommend it right now. I think there's a lot further upside, but the risk reward here is not very favorable. There's a lot of downside risk. This thing can come down quite a bit farther before it goes up. Okay, so you want to be avoiding things like this. You want to be avoiding things like XRP. I actually meant to make this video closer to this time, and because this is exactly what you can expect after such a powerful rally, to actually have nice sharp corrections, which can shake you out of your positions, especially. So what you really want to do is you want to get into positions when they break this trend, and then we want to look for ones that are right around here because they have this potential upside. The other one I want to talk about was Pengu, and that's a meme coin. It has been absolutely ripping lately. And you can just see that this is a terrible place to try to buy because we're at a major rejection. Like, you're very late to the party on this and you don't want to touch this. It doesn't mean that we can't have a correction and maybe there's going to be a buying opportunity in this chart. I believe that there's a lot more further upside to this chart, but you just don't want to be getting in at this time, okay? If anything, you could maybe buy when this flips support. So if this were to come up, if this were to blast through, maybe you could buy support for further upside. But I typically think it's more wise to wait for a pullback and buy on a pullback. So a couple charts that I'm interested in right now, and hopefully you can see why, is things like Sonic. Because we've had this downtrend, and especially if you do this on a weekly chart, it's more powerful. I would set these trends on a weekly time frame, because that is a very powerful trend line right here. And so what I'll do is I'll bring that back to the daily. Here, I'm just going to scooch this up. I like that a little better. However, you can see that we've breached this trend line, coming back down for a retest. That is very, very common. Typically what will happen is you'll come up, and when price approaches a level from the upside, you can expect buying. If price approaches a level from the underside, you can expect selling. And I'll actually do that right here. You can see that this was a pretty major support and resistance area. And when price came up to it, we got a rejection. And then now that we have broken that, we're coming back down for support. So you have a higher probability of success when you're buying support than you do even trying to front run this, even trying to buy this. So like right now, I'll show you another one that I am interested, but I'm holding off slightly because I think that it's just pertinent to wait for these things to break, because things can always break down even more. They can always break down more. And so we're getting a rejection right here. And so a good risk to reward as far as probabilities on your side would just be to wait for this to break the trend. Okay. And let's see, I wanted to go through a couple more charts here to give us an idea of just things to keep in mind. Those last couple I was talking about waiting for the trends to break, and this one I want to talk about buy zones, looking for different buy zones. This one's called Aptos. And you can see right here that this has basically just been in a trading range for quite some time. Now, this is one that has not broken trend, but the risk to reward here is very good. If this thing runs, the risk to reward is very, very good, because right now you have limited downside for the potential upside, right? So you have a high probability of rejection at the trend line, but right now we're sitting in this buy zone where it's been bought up every single time for the last several years, okay? Right? So as far as risk to the downside, it's very minimal, and it's just in a buy zone. You can see that long-term holders of this thing just keep buying this every time, or traders, even traders who are just trying to trade these ranges. And you can see that this potentially these levels got potentially front run here and sold off early. Also, that probably had to do with the market environment at the time. But however, you can just see that right now, the risk to the downside, you have 21% risk to the downside as opposed to a 300% move to the upside. So that's a risk reward of 14. So if you were to put in $100, you have the potential to make $1,400, and you're only risking $100. So that's the name of the game in trading. You want to find good risk to reward trades where you can lose several times and still win. So imagine, I mean, if you could find, 14 trades that had a 14-to-1 risk ratio, you could basically lose 13 times and win one time, and you'd break even. So you want to find, those are the kinds of things that you want to find. Okay. So don't be tempted to follow the hype and ape into things that are at their highs. It's better off to find things that are at their lows and have a better risk to reward and higher probability of success. One thing that I will go into as well is just basic trend lines, basic trend lines to get an idea of where to find support. Because if you were just dying to get in the market and you didn't want to wait, you just couldn't wait for this because you have a very strong feeling that prices are going to go higher, and you want to front run this and you want to get a good price because you want to possibly capture the 230% move to the upside, which is substantial. Maybe you've done your research on this token. This token is also accruing value. I'm going to go into like fundamentals probably on some other videos, but sometimes combining the fundamentals with the charts is helpful. But either way, let's just say you just couldn't wait and you're just dying to get into the market. Well, okay, fine. Then I guess one thing we can do is find these speed lines. You have these trend lines here, and they give you an idea of where the speed of the market is. And what I like to do is find areas where support and resistance, you can see there's been several areas of support and resistance here, meet up with these speed lines here. And that is a pretty good area to put in a buy order. You may not want to buy your entire bag at these levels, understanding that it's quite possible for this to come down to the downside. You want to be prepared for both. What happens if this price goes down? Well, that's a good thing. Then I can buy. What if the price goes up? Well, that's a good thing because we've broken this trend line and we have a higher probability of success. So you want to try to frame your mind to where either eventuality is going to be an opportunity for you. Okay. So, well, if price comes down, well, that's going to be an opportunity. Another one here would be using your 50% tool is very, very powerful. It often lines up with support and resistance. And oftentimes when it doesn't, these 50% tools can be more accurate. Sometimes the 50% tool will be just above that powerful support and resistance, and your 50% tool will get hit before that resistance or support gets hit. Okay, so these are just three basic tools. A lot of people try to make this really complicated, like you need to know like 100 million different things. Sure, you can go through and there's tons of data you can go through and tons of different indicators, but honestly, keeping it simple typically is better. Because if it breaks this speed line, if it breaks this trend line, well, then we're into an area of weakness, but there's a higher likelihood of support here at this 50% level. So this could be a good area to front run the break of this trend if you are convinced that that is going to happen. However, you still have to be aware of the downside and put your stops in place because you can always be wrong. You have to be prepared for every eventuality. So right now you can see obviously the risk to the downside if we were to fail on this trade is 50%. Okay, well, if we were to buy here and we snagged an entry, well, now we're at 40%. So you can see that as prices come down into these areas, our risk reward actually gets a little bit better, even though we are buying into the weakness. So these are just definitely some things I want you to mull over and make your own plan. Okay, if you want to wait for this trend to break, you have a higher probability of the upside. If you can't wait and you're the kind of person, this is the whole thing. You need to know who you are as a trader, who you are as a person. I can't wait. I have to get in now. Okay, well, then try to do it as smart as you can and use some of these simple tools to give you areas that have a higher probability of success, a higher probability of areas where this thing can go in your favor, right? We could come all the way down to this trend line here before we go higher. And are you okay with that? And can you live with that? Okay, have a plan for both sides. Have a plan so that you can be prepared. Okay. The last thing I'm going to leave you on is what do I expect for the rest of this cycle? Probably should have led with this, but that's okay. I expect a lot more upside to the altcoins. I think the upside to the larger things like Bitcoin and even Ethereum, as far as percentage gains, are now more limited. Things like XRP definitely, because I think I can go into other analysis with the XRP, but XRP I think is absolutely reaching its, its risk reward is not there. But some of these other ones, like we've been going, like Sonic, say things that are a little bit farther down and have yet to break their trends or are just breaking trend, the risk reward there is much better. And you are at less risk of buying those at those levels than you would be the XRPs, the Hypes, and the Pudgy Penguins, right? Just use those as some cherry picked examples because that's what's running hot right now. Okay, so as you can see, this is the others dominance versus the Bitcoin dominance. And really what I've highlighted is just very small areas where the others, which is everything outside the top 10, which would basically be all the altcoins, outperform Bitcoin for a very brief period. Okay, so typically you'll have a bear market, things break trend. That happened basically right here, broke trend, and then we had an acceleration in the altcoins, and then they gave it all back to Bitcoin. So we had a bear market between the altcoins and Bitcoin. Then that broke trend, and then we had a lot of acceleration. Now this whole thing really was a bull market for the altcoins, but that accelerated phase, that last phase, happened right near the end. Okay, now that's what I'm anticipating here. We've broken out of this descending wedge, which is a bullish pattern, just like we broke out of the ascending wedge on the Bitcoin dominance. That's the very, very first signs that we have the potential to break this trend. Really, once we break this trend, we have even more confirmation. But we've had a lot of signals signaling strength in the altcoins before any of this has happened. Okay. So this is what I'm anticipating. This right here, this highlighted area, we're going to break trend and we're going to accelerate. We're going to break trend and accelerate. We're going to break this trend and we're going to accelerate. Now this breakout of this descending wedge is potentially the very, very first, signal of that potential. Okay, so I think we have a long way to go in the altcoins, but the whole thing is that if you're going to make it in this game, you have to be prepared for both sides, and you have to basically do as much study as you can, prepare, do 99%, 95% prep, and then 5% execution. Okay, if you're trying to jump in with your emotions, you're going to get wrecked every single time. Trust me, I've been there, done it the hard way for way too long. And anyway, now now that I've learned the hard lessons, hopefully I can reach out to you guys and give you some make your lives much easier than my life has been, definitely. So either way, you can definitely also not be surprised if Bitcoin comes down to test this support and resistance as well. When all these things, when all the stars align and we're getting support here and we're getting rejection on the Bitcoin dominance, all these things kind of line up then that's definitely going to help put the probabilities in your favor. So anyway, hopefully this was helpful. Like and subscribe for more, and we'll just keep on the right side of this market. It's like later, guys.